Won't Mount join Tuchel at Bayern? No, apparently not, Callum. At least that's what I've been reading. Now, again, I've got nothing on this that is unique to anything else you've read or seen, but I don't believe so, no. And Liverpool are favourites with the bookies. Liverpool are favourites with a lot of journalists as well, with regards to Mason Mount. And just looking at the odds here, it's 2-1 for him to join Liverpool, 6-1 for him to join Manchester United, and 12-1 for him to join Manchester City. Now, it doesn't say anything about the odds for him to stay as a Chelsea player. I have no problem with Mason Mount as a Liverpool signing, but I do have a problem with the numbers involved. So I've still seen today people saying that Chelsea are going to ask 70 million pound for Mason Mount with 1 year left on his deal. If I was any club who was interested in Mason Mount and I approached Chelsea and heard that number back, I would piss myself laughing on the phone. How are we in a world where with 1 year left in your contract, you think you can get 70 million pound for a player? It is nuts. And if anybody pays that, including us, they need their head examined. It's crazy money for somebody who's a good footballer, somebody who could develop, somebody who could certainly do a job. But 70 million, I'd just say, hang on 1 more year, mate. We'll sign you for free and give you a 30 million quid signing on bonus. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody will pay that with 1 year left. I hope so, Lance, because I think, for me, 35, 40 million tops is the number I'd be comfortable with Liverpool spending on Mason Mount with 1 year to go. And look, I'd be interested to hear from other clubs fans if there's any in the chat right now. If you're a United fan, if you were to sign Mason Mount, what would be the number you'd be comfortable with? Because 70 million is crazy. Maddie said I'd take Neves. So would I. There's some easy connections to make there. Obviously, Pep Linder's coach Ruben Neves when he was breaking through at Porto. So there's a relationship there anyway. Pep has a great knowledge of Portuguese football. So I wouldn't say no to Ruben Neves. I think I pitched the idea of Ruben Neves to you guys maybe a year ago as somebody who I think could come in and do a job. He wouldn't be, you wouldn't bring him in as your, out and out big money signing. Like, you'd want to have your Jude Bellingham there. But I wouldn't say no to a Ruben Neves in our midfield. Could probably get Rice for about 70 to 80 million. What's Rice's contract situation, by the way? I've got no idea how long he has left on his West Ham deal. But I remember seeing West Ham talking, 90, 100 million for Declan Rice. And for me, Declan Rice is probably the only viable Jude Bellingham alternative if the worst was to come to the worst. Would you pay 70 million for McAllister from Brighton? No, I wouldn't. Not 70 million. No. I think there's just better value out there. Like, McAllister's a fine footballer, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say he isn't a very good player. But I think the money in football has gone absolutely ludicrous over the past few years. Let me put it to you this way. One of the things that gets spoken about Jurgen Klopp a lot is that he said if it ever comes to a point where he's to pay 100 million for a player, he'd pack it in. Well, that came up very quick, right? Because we're now looking at 100 million on Jude Bellingham. So football and the transfer world has gone absolutely batshit crazy. And it's fair enough for people to say, well, that's the way the game's going, or, that's the way the market is. But ultimately, it's us suckers as fans who end up paying for these over-the-top transfers, be it through increased television subscriptions or jerseys getting more expensive or tickets to the games getting more expensive or whatever it is. We usually end up on the hook for it, right, as fans. So I think this bubble is going to have to maybe not burst, but slow down at some point. I mentioned yesterday that Arsenal are looking at giving Saka a new contract worth £300,000 a week. Now, Saka's an incredibly good football player, and he will do great things at Arsenal. He will do great things with the English national team, but it's a slippery slope if you're giving a 21, 22-year-old 300 grand a week. Because what happens in 2 years or 2.5 years when he wants to negotiate his next contract or the one after that? You're very quickly at a point where you're paying him 500 or 600 grand a week in 3 or 4 years' time. And that's just not sustainable. It just isn't. So, the lazy answer of this is the way football is going is just nonsense. Speak to Chelsea fans, and I've read some forums where their fans have been really pissed off about the way the ticket prices have gone. Some of the tickets apparently jumping from 70 quid a game up over 200 quid to watch a game of fucking football. And this isn't like corporate seats. I'm talking about standard seats. Would you rather Gvardiol or Mason Mount? Every instinct I have wants me to say Gvardiol because it's the right answer. But our need is far greater to rebuild midfield. So I think that has to be the preference, particularly for where the money goes. That's why I was so shocked to hear Neil Jones say that, he's got a firm no on Liverpool's interest in Evan and Dika, because that seems like a no-brainer, right? That we should be in that conversation. Same with Gavi. If Gavi's situation at Barcelona isn't resolved, we should absolutely be in the conversation about trying to get him towards Liverpool. But it does feel like we're going to go into a summer where, if I had to put my money on the table, I would say Bellingham and Mount or Bellingham and Neves would be the two I would consider most likely to see come through the doors at Anfield over the summer. I think there are better options than Mount and for cheaper. So with Mount, Callum, you're right from a footballing perspective, but you do have to take into account the homegrown status of Mason Mount as well, and that he has, been tried and tested in the Premier League. But I do agree with you. There are better footballers out there, in my opinion, particularly if you're looking at that amount of money that was mentioned earlier on, 70 million. Not for me, nowhere near that. Even Mason Mount with like 3 years on his contract, I wouldn't pay 70 million quid for. But I do think, I can't sit here and lie. I do believe there is real interest. I do believe Jurgen Klopp is an admirer of Mason Mount. I do believe Jurgen Klopp can see a way that he could implement Mason Mount into our team. And I'd be fine if it all came together and we signed him. But it has to be for a realistic fee, right? 70 million is just nonsense. Would you take Ugart, Bellingham, and Mount as a cheap window? A cheap window? You're looking at, honestly, I don't know what Ugart's clause is. Is it 30, 40 million? I don't know. But you're looking at probably 160 to 170 million for Bellingham and Mount. So that's the cheap window idea out the window straight away. But would I take those three? I haven't seen enough of Ugarte or Ugarte. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I haven't seen enough of them, in all honesty. I watched them play against Arsenal. Thought he was okay. But I've heard great reviews from other people who've watched them play. But I can't sit here and lie and say I know all that much about them. But I think Portuguese football is hot right now, and there's some real talent in that league. So I would back our scouts to at least know about the guy and, have run the rule over him and see what they think. I wouldn't take Mount. I don't think he'll ever be a big part of a superstar team one day, which clubs want, said Sean. As a United fan, that's fair enough, Sean. I mean, put it this way, Sean. I would 100% rather Frankie de Jong, excuse me, than Mason Mount. And I know as a United fan, you probably feel the same for your own team. But for me, if you're looking at spending that much money, I would much rather Frankie de Jong because I think he's a better footballer.